guys have come a long way. And I think this is a great event. I, unfortunately, when I was a postdoc and a graduate student, did not make the most of such events. But now, fast forward 10 years and the value of these events and the networking opportunity, it's just invaluable. So I would highly encourage all the graduate students and the postdocs to make the most of these seminars. You can shut the audio off when someone's talking, but definitely make sure that you can connect with these guys offline, either by LinkedIn, that's a great resource, or just by personal email. There's always someone there to help. And as I'll go through, and that's how I've been able to get my positions as either a scientist at Azitra or this current position. So networking it is, and make the most of it. So with that said, I'm going to go through a couple slides, and although it says insights into technology transfer, what I'm going to tell you is more my experience and my story of how I got into this field and what I am looking to achieve or get out of technology transfer, and how I think it's going to help everyone. All right, so just a couple things we're going to go over. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about me and my career story. A few highlights about what is technology transfer. I'm no expert. We do have experts at UConn here, and I believe I was looking at the AIOG site. So I know you guys have hosted Donna and Greg and Lindsay, great people. So I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm going to just give you an overview of what technology transfer is, and how you could use it for science and otherwise. And then the lessons are more so how I'm using technology transfer in my current position. All right, so just a little bit about me. I got my master's in microbiology and immunology at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. And my dissertation was actually on autoimmune diseases. From there on, I continued in the same lab. My graduate advisor at the time had just received an R01 to work with stem cells, and it was placental stem cells and their role in conditions associated with pregnancy. So I started working on my PhD, and it was a broad degree in cellular and molecular biology, but the project that I worked on was looking at the effects of hypoxia on the differentiation and the development of cancer stem cells. And the importance of this comes through because there's a pregnancy-associated condition called preeclampsia or toxemia, wherein there's a failure of the placenta to fully develop. So during my PhD, what I was trying to do is develop a mouse model system to study this disease. And I'm actually going through the details of what I'm doing, not to tell you what I have done, but it's more for you to show you that, it wasn't just one stream of science that I've held on to. It's just a variety of things that I've done over my career. And so at no point should you think that because I have a degree in immunology, that's all I can do, or because I've done placenta, I'm just stuck with pregnancy and, gynecology. So that's more where I'm trying to go with this. All right, so once I'm finished with my PhD, I was interested in pursuing stem cells, but I did not want to stay in the placental field anymore. So just to diversify a little bit more, I moved to Massachusetts General Hospital, which is also a Harvard training center, to do my postdoc. And my postdoc was in actually the OBGYN department, where we looked at the effect of novel therapeutics in gynecological cancer. So there was a lot of mouse work, a lot different than looking at a developmental model. This was more now looking at the application of the models that we had developed and studying the effects of novel therapeutics. And the Cambridge area, as a lot of you are aware of, is a super rich environment for multiple biotechs and huge pharmaceuticals. So that kind of supported a lot of my work when I was at MGH. From there on, for just personal reasons, we had to move to Connecticut. And at the time, I decided to take a couple years break in my career. So I actually spent more, I think close to 2.5 years at home taking care of my little babies. And once, I was a little more comfortable letting go of them, I started looking for jobs in the Connecticut area. So a few of you may have overheard our conversation between Rob and me, but there's the Cure or the BioCT community. It's an excellent resource. So I had actually posted my resume on that website for months, someone found my resume and called me to see if I was still available for a position. And so I started off as a chief scientist at a startup called Azitra. It was just setting up base as a part of the technology incubation program at 400 Farmington. And it was a very unique opportunity for me because I was the first and the only employee for 6 months. Although the job description was helping them with therapeutic testing and in vivo models, it actually was a lot more than that. So it entailed everything, including writing all the registrations, overseeing the operations, setting up the lab, any permits that we needed. All of those I had the opportunity to work with, but that was a huge turning point, I think, in my career, because that opened up multiple avenues once I had the experience in doing all of these different things. The other thing to note also is that this was a skin microbiome company, and I have no experience with dermatology or microbiology, so it was relearning a lot of the science. But the more you learn, you realize that although it's dermatology, although it's microbiology, they all have the same systems. So it was a very interesting first 4 months because there was a lot of me restarting after 2.5 years, not just that, but also learning new things. But a wonderful stepping stone. I was with them for about 4 years, 3.5 years. And then it was time for me to move on because I was looking for more of a administrative position. Also during my time at Azitra, as I was working with startups, it was an experience very different than working in an academic lab. So a lot of, usually people would assume that a startup is just like an academic lab, and it is true. It functions very similar, but it's the evolution of this academic science into a biotech or a formalized commercial company, which was super interesting to me. And that's what drew me basically to try and learn more about what exactly entails this whole process of taking technology from the lab and either going and forming a startup or licensing it out to someone else so they can commercialize it. So I signed up for an internship with the University of Connecticut or Technology Commercialization Service. Greg Gallo, who's the director, was the one I worked with, and it's been a great experience. I'll talk about that a little later. So currently what I'm doing is I'm actually the senior manager of lab operations at an immuno-oncology startup. It's called EvolveImmune. It's also located at 400 Farmington as a part of the technology incubation program. I'm still continuing on with my internship with the TCS. And I'm also a fellow at the AUTM Foundation, which is the Association for University Technology Managers. And by the way, if anyone has any questions, I want this to be more of an exchange. I don't want to be talking all the time. So feel free to interrupt me if you have a question at any point. All right, so just to give you a quick overview of what is technology transfer. So very generically, it's just a term that's used to describe how you're going to share or pass on the knowledge from one group to another. The first group being the inventor, the second group who's trying to seek the technology and commercialize it. When you talk about technology, it's not just a tangible technology, right? It could be anything. It could be skill set, it could be knowledge, any kind of transfer is considered as technology transfer. And there are multiple different aspects that come into this transfer. So one of it is the actual invention, which is obviously the most important part. But following that, you have how that innovation is commercialized, what's the design of this invention. And then an equally important aspect is how do you market this technology? So, just having a great technology is not enough. It's how do you package it and present it to the buyer or the interested party is equally important. And so these are the different aspects that you study or are able to experience when you learn, when you're obtaining your formal training as a part of technology transfer. So like I mentioned earlier, the different parts of the whole process, there's basically three core aspects to technology transfer. You have a disclosure, which is when the inventor would bring in the idea, and they could be at different stages. Since I have experience with the academic area, I'm just going to speak about academics. So I've worked with faculty who have literally just come up with the idea and who come up to us and say, look, we're just interested. This is what I was thinking about, and I wanted to share this with you earlier on. I just want you to assess what you think about our idea, and you think it's worth commercializing. Then we have other groups who have progressed significantly in this process and who actually have a prototype that's built, that's ready to hit the market, ready to send out to a commercial partner. So there could be disclosures that come in at various levels. What the technology commercialization service or office does is it basically evaluates what's coming through in the sense, is this technology something that you would partner with? Would we want to patent it? Would you want to license the technology? And again, I'm not going to get into the details of the description of what each of these aspects are. But these are the core basis for how technology would then move from what was invented in the lab all the way up to a commercial product. Now, one arrow that you have here, and I don't know if you can see my cursor, that I have right in the middle, and that is a little bigger than the other two, is the strategy. And it's an important one because that oftentimes determines the impact of the invention in the next steps. So, and a lot of these, the strategy comes from the group that you're working with in the commercialization service. So this involves the valuation of technology, right? So this group is going to help you with identifying where would you put the value at. And it's oftentimes not the value that you see in the current market, but more the projection of when you would see this in the market, which is in the next 5 or 10 years. So a lot of the strategy that goes into commercializing is oftentimes more important than just getting a patent or the licensing part of it. All right, so where does technology transfer come in academia? So that's why the title says technology transfer in I or you. So these are just examples of how I had experienced it during my career. So as a graduate student, all of us, we develop novel assays to test compounds. Oftentimes, if you're a chemist, you're working in a lab, you come up with different ways of generating a new compound, or by changing certain groups, you may make it more, have a better efficacy, a better way to deliver it. all of these, and you often don't think about it, but all of these are modifications that have a potential to make the pre-existing product better and more useful or more applicable. And they would all fall into the category of something that you could potentially commercialize, or a disclosure or invention. So as a graduate student, just like most of you, I was involved in developing a lot of these assays, screening compounds for efficacy. And one of the projects that I was working on during my master's, which was in developing an anti-apoptotic drug or a compound, my graduate advisor at the time, he decided to take this on further, and he started up with a smaller startup company. So at the time, I was a part of it, signing all these disclosure papers and thinking through it. And I was like, okay, I'm just signing the papers. But, there was no understanding of what the impact is, or what this entails, or what this process is. So moving forward, when I went ahead and did my postdoc, again, I had the opportunity to work with multiple pharmaceutical companies in Boston to test their test drug in the xenograft mouse models that we had developed for ovarian cancer. And it was very interesting that I would say there was at least 70% or so congruence between what we would test in mice and what would happen in patients. So it was an amazing model system to work with. And again, what I worked as a part of was a sponsored research agreement. So we would meet on a regular basis with a lot of these scientists from the company to discuss our results. We'd have a formalized presentation. I'd write up reports, not necessarily knowing what this package is building up to. So this is another example. An SRA, or sponsored research agreement, is another aspect of technology transfer. So it always does not, technology does not always necessarily end up with a patent. It could come in different ways. You have a model system that we had developed, and we were offering that as a test system for the drug companies. So this is where the sponsored research agreements were coming in. And finally, the real job, where I started working with startups, which was the eye opener, I guess, for me, where when you put it in perspective, the whole process came together. This is what technology is. So the first company I worked with was actually founded by a medical student out of Yale. And he literally was doing something in a lab as a part of a rotation. And he came up with this idea, and he's like, that's it, I'm going to build a company. And that's how that whole company came around. And it's doing wonderful. It's doing great. They've moved down to Brantford right now. But the more you learn about the process, the more, I was interested in knowing, how does this go on? How does this whole process work? So why was I interested in technology? Like I mentioned, what are startups? How are they formed? I mean, can I just stand up and say, okay, I have an idea, brilliant, I'm going to get started, I'm going to set up shop, just rent some space. Is that how it works? How does bench science turn into a commercial product? I'm sure everyone's aware of this, but you can't just take something that you say has wonderful results in your MCF7s or COS7s and say, that's it, I'm going to use this in mice. And if it works in mice, it's going to work in humans. There's a pretty distinct process, and the process involves a lot of strategy and different steps to come to commercialization. So basically these were all the different things. And then the intellectual property, obviously, which is what is considered as the scientific currency, I guess. For startups and smaller companies, the more patents that you have associated with the products that you're working with, the higher the value of you when they're looking for acquisitions, etc. So this is what was driving me to get some formal training or understanding of the technology transfer process. Am I too fast? Is everyone okay? I mean, I don't understand. I don't see anyone.
I think this is a good pace.
Okay, good.
I'm also going to mention that people can feel free to ask questions in the chat if you don't want to unmute yourself. and I can see the messages privately and I can ask them for you. So there is that option.
Okay, good, good. Thank you. Because I don't see the chat either. Okay. All right. So, so this is what brought me basically to the internship at UConn TCS. And I had the opportunity, and Rob knows Vaibhav, that's how we were introduced. And he was the one, and one of the mixers that was hosted by Tip. We just got talking, and I said, yeah, I come with a different background, and I'm just interested in how this whole process unfolds. And he's like, yeah, why don't you come over? We are starting an internship program, and you may be able to learn more about it. So as a part of the internship at UConn, I was able to work with the licensing director. So at the time, since I was in the life sciences field, I was working closely with the director and the life sciences licensing director. What we do is we do a lot of invention disclosures, which is, as I mentioned, when a faculty comes up with an idea, whether it's just something that's on paper, or if they have actually run experiments and they have results to show that what they're thinking of is very different and valuable. They would send in a disclosure of invention form. What the next step for me would be, I would, with the directors, go meet with the faculty to understand what their invention is all about. And the background, I'd be doing a lot of literature and patent searches. So it was understanding, how different is the invention from what is already available in the market or that's published. What's the value? And the more I started reviewing or studying the literature and presenting my assessments, the more I realized that technology transfer is often not about the basic science of, did I do the experiment right? It's more about, did I do the right experiment, right? So it's oftentimes picking, the best experiment to prove that what you're working with is working and has value. And that took a lot of time. And that was one of the things that, as a part of the startup as well, that helped me, is the way you view science and the way you view your work. We often get caught up in, you should have done the ELISA and not run the Western. True, it's important, but what is that giving me? What's the information that it's giving me? And what is the right experiment to run to answer the question I'm asking? And a lot of that perspective came in when I was doing these assessments, because when I would discuss these assessments during our disclosure meetings, or before with the licensing directors, it'd always be like, you need to think about not the science, but the value of the science. And that has stuck with me. And I think it has helped me tremendously, both at my first job and at my current job, because, you step back and you look at, what am I doing and why is it important and how am I going to apply it? The answer is a lot different than ELISA versus Western. It just helps you appreciate your work a lot more. All right, so moving on. So, you get to learn a lot during, I got to learn a lot during this internship about the marketing strategies, the current technology landscape. And I worked with technologies which were from something that was a implant that was used for insulin port, to a pacemaker, to a platform to differentiate cells. And so it just gives you an opportunity to experience so many different streams of science as well. It was and is, and I'm sure in the future as well, will be an amazing experience for me. All right. So while I was doing my internship, one of the directors recommended that I look into the AUTM Foundation. So the AUTM Foundation is basically a university-wide foundation that is functional in the United States. It is the Association of the University Technology Managers. this is where all the technology offices from all the academic institutions come together to review the current reforms, the legal reforms, discuss their challenges with trying to patent something, their interactions with pharmaceuticals. It was a very, the more I was reading about it, it was a very interesting opportunity, and I applied for the fellowship. It's offered every year. If you guys are interested, you should definitely take a look at the AUTM website. I think they have 3 different fellowships. A majority of them are offered to individuals who have less than a year of experience in technology transfer. And what they offer as a part of the fellowship package is unrestricted access to all the tools, the webinars, and also to all the individuals who are a part of that group. So once you have the fellowship, once you sign up for being a part of the AUTM Foundation, everyone in the AUTM Foundation is considered a part of your network. So at any point of time, you just pick up the phone and say, hey, I was just interested because I recently saw this technology go through your office, and, I just wanted to learn more about it. They're more than happy to sit down and talk to you about it. So as a part of this fellowship, I was able to get access to a lot of the courses that they offer to us for free. So they offer to you what is called as a tools course, which gives you all the courses and the information essential. It's a foundation course for technology transfer. So, I came with no background in what tech transfer is. And I was sitting at a table where there was one person who was from the IP office, there was one person from a pharmaceutical, there was one who was a licensing agent, one from an IP firm. So, and it was interesting. Everyone was at the same level. So everyone was learning, some knew more terms than the others, but it was just a wonderful experience. And all of these are now a part of my network. On LinkedIn, we're all connected. We ping each other every once in a while, if we see a job posting, or, they'll say, hey, I noticed you just found a new job. Is there any opportunity to license the products that you're looking at? So it's been a wonderful resource, and I would highly encourage you guys to take a look at it if you're interested in tech transfer. All right, so the question that people often ask me is, where do you go from here? Okay, so you have your startup experience, you've done this internship, it's coming up 2 years that I'm doing this internship, I have this fellowship. So where do you go from here? What's next? So a career in tech transfer? Certainly. So these are just, for your information, a bunch of different positions that are offered as a part of tech transfer. There's a transfer officer, a licensing officer, an IP manager who manages the intellectual property portfolio for a university, a licensing manager, and a business development manager. So yeah, maybe, sure, why not? It's definitely something that interests me, but, this is something I would think is not going to happen right now. But the most important thing for me, I think, is what I've learned from tech transfer and using the tools and the experience. And like I said, the perspective of the value of what I'm doing is something that would definitely go with me forever, whether I am in tech transfer or outside. So even right now, as a part of the startup, it's interesting, we recently had a conversation with an IP firm about the property that we have. And they recommended that you have a technology assessment group internal to your company. And I was like, yeah, I'll sign up for that. So it's a lot of these things that you can use, whether you are directly related with tech transfer, or if you're not really doing tech transfer, but something that is your skill set that you could use for your next position. So again, it says like the skills necessary for tech transfer and commercialization are much different than something that you would need for science, but it's the perspective that also helps you understand the value of what you're doing, right? And the skill set that I have derived from working at, in the tech transfer as an intern has definitely helped me understand the technology, how I value the technology that I'm working with. So, I gave you this example earlier is, overexpressing a protein, is great. It's all science, but where does the science go next? And how am I going to make it be applicable and, be able to benefit from this science is what I was able to learn from tech transfer. And I think the third point, which was very important for me because I am not a good negotiator at all, is we actually had a 3-day hardcore course on negotiations. And they teach you a lot about like body language, about, because you didn't win an argument doesn't mean you lost. So it's a lot of these things that I learned as a part of this internship, as a part of the Autumn Foundation, that I think I will carry for much longer. So with that, I think I'm going to end right there. The 2 resources you have here, I would encourage you to take a look at the TCS website, the Autumn Foundation, and I'm in your network now. So if you need any additional help, I'm more than happy to help you with that.
Perfect, thank you. We did have a question in the chat, and it has to do with BioCT, and they were asking generally if that's the site where you post your resume, but more importantly, could you talk a little bit about BioCT as a resource for both, I guess, startup scientists and I guess people already part of biotech in Connecticut?
Yeah, so I can definitely talk to you about a resource. So BioCT, it's a consortium that's been set up by a lot of the biotech companies in Connecticut, is not only just to support the biotech environment in Connecticut, but also make sure that you attract talent and you retain talent. So what it does is it actually provides a platform for you to look for jobs and recruit candidates that are local here. So from my perspective, I had used that for job search. I had posted my resume on there several years ago. And it's funny, I actually posted my resume and it was picked on 2 years later. So it's just something that it's there and they value. BioCT has evolved a lot since then. They are a great networking group. If you're looking for opportunities, they do have mixers. Robin, we were just talking about this earlier. It's a great place to go meet with the local companies that you have. You get to learn a lot about that. There's a lot of legislators who are also a part of that group. So you get to understand better about, how the biotech environment is in Connecticut as well. So that's another resource. I should have put that on there. Definitely look into that.
No worries. Do other people have questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat function.
I have a question. So you were discussing earlier about, identifying the niche that the technology could be applied for in the field that you're going to commercialize it for. And you said it's not necessarily about right now, it's about 5-10 years from now. So I wondered, how did you know, or how do you go about deciding that kind of projection? Like, do you get like help from somebody who has a looking glass or like a crystal ball? Like how do you know that it would be like that?
That's a great question. It's something I've often asked, Greg and Amit, who I'm working with, and they all say that's it. It's a crystal ball. You just predict, and it's a trend. So a lot of these strategies depend on what's happened in the past as well. So there are certain technologies that seem to be immortal. I don't know if that's the right word, but they would always be well received. And they're ageless technologies. So if you're working with a technology of that nature, obviously there's a lot more strength to what you're proposing. But there are certain technologies that come and go. And these are the technologies that the wave is important, right? So if you've seen, I'm very bad at giving examples, but stem cells, for example. There was a wave, right? When you had stem cells, and that was 10 years ago, maybe everyone wanted to do everything in stem cells. Yeah, that we're past that wave now. We know way beyond the genome sequenced. There's a lot more information available there. So anything to do with that kind of technology is not going to go very far. And another example would be, a very practical one, is like the xenograph model system that I was working with. When I was doing it, it was the craze. Everyone wanted to use that as a testing system. But as days went on, with the years, there was more work with it, and there was always a factor of, oh yeah, but the mouse system is going to play a role, and it's going to be different. It's not human. So people are now moving into using a platform to generate like 3D organoid systems, which would be a lot more relevant. So it's a lot about understanding what the past has been to predict what it's going to be in the future. But there is no formula, and it is not an absolute science. It's a lot based on the experience that you have with working with technology of this nature, for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions?
I have another one.
Okay.
So, okay, so I just, all right, how do I say it? I did like an internship in venture capitalism, and I've sat in on some other meetings with tech transfer, and it seems like, you might have talked about this, but like there's a certain percentage of not failed, but like it doesn't go through fruition because, basic sciences is hard, and you need a certain level of, or biological sciences, you need a certain level of, data to solidify what you're doing. And then that's only a part of the component. Like, it's like, that's actually, if you look at the due diligence for people who assess these technologies, that's only like one of the boxes out of like, I don't know, 10, 12, 16 boxes. And I don't think people can, necessarily appreciate that this is like, the system is actually very big, and we're only part of one little cog, and as a scientist, as a bench scientist. So could you speak to maybe like, you're part of this process and you're helping things move forward, but like, it's not like, always a success story, and it's, I don't know, it's like trial and error, I guess. People at UConn come up with things. We don't necessarily talk about it because patent, you need patent approval, and you can't necessarily talk about it until you get that done. But like, that is a whole process too. You have to start it early. So, I mean, people who are interested in like creating things that couldn't help, further medicine, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? Like it's hard. It's not, but you should not do it, because it's kind of why we're doing the science, right?
Correct. You're absolutely right. And I think where you're getting to is the point that I was making a long time ago. Science is important, but not all science can be commercialized, right? And there's a difference between science from an understanding perspective and science from an application perspective. And they're very important. Unless you have the strength of the understanding, you're not going to be able to build something that can be applied, right? And I think that's where I don't want to call it failures of disclosures or invention. I don't think that's the right word. But I think they're insufficient in showing you how you can apply it to a commercial stream. Mm. And that's where you see that a lot of the disclosures oftentimes don't fulfill the criteria that you need to move forward to the patenting process. So it comes back to, good science and the value of the science. But you can't have value unless the science is good, but not all good science has value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good way of, I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, it doesn't feel right or fair to say failure, but it exactly. Was like, you're right. It can't all be that, but right. If you have something though, that could be, potentially have value, I guess, is it it's important to talk to someone, right? To talk
Yes.
to the tech transfer office and have a conversation so you can start the paperwork. And if it falls apart, it falls apart. At least, you know, you didn't lose the opportunity, I guess.
And this is one of the things that as an intern as well, I was talking to the director. I was like, you know, you need to open up this to the graduate students, because the PI runs everything. That's great. But the graduate students are the ones doing the work. They're the ones who actually know what's going on. So if you educate them to identify what has value, what comes through is going to be more enriched, right? And that's going to have a lot more potential. So definitely, I at some point I thought they were having these tech transfer clinics. I don't know. Now is a different situation, but I think at some point there was some conversation of setting up these kind of a meet and greet with the graduate students, so they get a lot more engaged in the process as well.
Yeah, I think there's been talk of it, but I haven't seen anything. It's hard. now what happens?
Definitely, and now more than ever. So yeah, it's challenging.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question from the chat. I was they're wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the actual internship process, how you started that conversation, I guess, with your own university's tech transfer office, and how they, I guess, guided you to apply for the Autumn Fellowship. If you could elaborate more on that.
Sure, definitely. So the time when I signed up for the internship at UConn, they did not really have a formal internship program. It was more about something that they were thinking about. And so what I did was I basically sent in my resume to say that I have experience in life sciences, and I'm interested in learning about, you know, the whole process of commercialization. So I had a short interview with the director. We discussed, you know, what my interest was, what the tech transfer office can offer. And, you know, I had a full-time job. So that is something that also plays into it, right? Because when you're students, there's more than one job, right? It's like you got to finish your experiments, and those never end, really. You got to write your dissertation. So, you know, it's just ongoing. So there's a lot about the time commitment as well. How much can you commit and what can you do? I think now they have a more, I think they have a process now. Brittany, did you apply through that process? I forget, but I don't know if they have an internship process now. But anyways, I would, at least for UConn, I would recommend that you reach out to the office. Greg Gallo is the director of the Tech Transfer Service. He's super helpful, great mentor. Reach out to him and express your interest, and he'll take it from there. In terms of the Autumn Foundation, so this was just something that as I was working, I was introduced to by one of the directors here at the Tech Commercialization Service. They said, this is a foundation of, I think I want to say almost every tech transfer individual in an academic institution is part of the Autumn Foundation. So that's how I was introduced to the Autumn Foundation. They had a couple of fellowships. For the fellowship, you need to write, you need to have 2 letters of support, and you need to kind of write a letter to say why you're interested in doing this and how do you think this fellowship will support you in your career. So it was a short letter and a letter of intent, if you will, and then 2 letters of support. And it's a pretty high acceptance rate, if I'm not too wrong. And they usually take up to, I want to say maybe 10 individuals, but the internship program, interestingly, is an international program. So they're international fellows. We had one from Canada, one from Scotland, one from England, and we had one from Australia. So it's a pretty diverse group that you get to be a part of. That's another interesting conversation you'd have, is how technology transfer works in different countries, which comes back when you're doing your IPs, because that's how they determine the process. So, yep. And they're usually, I think the applications are due in June, I think in June.
Excellent. That's awesome. I did not know that I didn't know anything about that fellowship actually.
You know, I know that UConn has the Kanan Fellowship, which Britt did.
Yes.
And so if you're a UConn student, a graduate student, and I think medical students as well have an opportunity to apply for the Kanan Fellowship. And I'm sure that other universities, we do have a diverse audience. We have opened it up to students other than UConn.
Okay.
I'm sure that there are, resources through other tech transfer offices. I know that Yale has an amazing tech transfer office program.
OCR, yeah, they have.
And as well, there's, in addition to BioCT, there's also ABCT, Accelerator for Biosciences in Connecticut, which they're based out of New York, I think, but do a lot of work in Brantford. And so if you're, thinking about if you have that idea for a startup and you've already worked with a tech transfer office, they're another resource that can help you, get off the ground. So there are resources out there for everyone.
Yeah, definitely reach out to your own tech transfer office. And I'm sure if you express that interest, they will build a program for you to, be a part of this. Because the whole idea with the AUTM Foundation too is they're training the next generation. And that's their goal, is to train the next generation in the process of tech transfer. So they're more than happy, more than willing to have that conversation with you. So I would definitely encourage it.
Wonderful.
Do we have any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
And so I'm working in the Boston, Cambridge area. What differences and similarities do you see between the startup and tech transfer climate between there and Connecticut?
That's a great question. 2 parts to it. I was the I just focused on my work postdoc. I don't care about the networking. I don't want to spend my time. I got to do my experiments and get out of here kind of a postdoc. So unfortunately, I did not make the most of my time there outside of the lab. But there are a lot more groups and networking events that you can be a part of in the Cambridge area. So your question about tech transfer and commercialization in Boston versus Connecticut. So obviously with the density of the different pharmaceutical companies, the opportunities for you to seek collaborative projects is much higher, much, much higher. But there's also a lot more competition. So not every lab will have the opportunity to work with an external partner. In terms of, and with Mass General, which is where I did my postdoc, it's a huge institution. They, by the way, also offer fellowships, and I was looking into that as well before I started off with UConn. And I think that their process is a lot more formalized process. In case you guys are interested, sorry, a little bit of an offshoot, but NIH offers fellowships, and it's a 1-year program in tech transfer if anyone's interested. And of course, it's a very competitive program, but if you're serious about it, that would be another one. There's a bunch of universities that offer this as a postdoctoral training program. I think Wisconsin is one. I'd met a couple people at the networking event with AUTM. In terms of UConn, I think it's coming up. I see UConn kind of has an advantage, or Connecticut has an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage being it's trying to build its own community. So you're able to, how should I put it? Because you're able to build your own community, the innovation is better. Not better, but like there's more to work together with. But you have like a huge community in New York and in Massachusetts, which you're competing against them as well, right? So I think in the last 3 years, Connecticut has grown tremendously from a biotech perspective, in terms of the innovations and the licensing. The few meetings that I was in with the tech transfer, it would be surprising the size of UConn. We actually have a very good standing in terms of the IP revenue that's generated, considering like UPenn or any of the other universities. So we do very well. So it comes down to what's your technology and how are you marketing it and who is it going to. So once you've identified the right partner, it's an open game, you know, everyone, you just got to know that. The advantage with Connecticut, though, is we do have a lot of local engineering groups. And so the engineering department has a lot more opportunities to collaborate locally within Connecticut. So I definitely would say that as well. Yeah.
It was very insightful. I do agree. We do have a lot of local partnerships, and that is the advantage of being here and being more smaller and companies, I guess, per se. And
yep.
It's advantages that we should take while we're here.
Absolutely. And something that I've also gained from going to these networking events is that, you know, Connecticut is still growing. And so when you think about number of, you know, biotech companies, say in New York and Boston, yeah, there's more in both of those areas, but it's so saturated.
Exactly.
And so if you're coming in with a new idea, Connecticut is going to have the space for you. And there's all these new incubator programs starting up. There's, you know, the one in Farmington, one in Storrs, New Haven, Stamford, and Brantford. And so all of these areas are, you know, currently growing, and the community is really great, as Kashmira has talked about. But yeah, there's pros and cons, I guess, to, you know, the biotech community in Connecticut. But it is growing, and it's really cool to see how far it's come in just a few short years.
I mean, you know, in the past, you know, not having these opportunities, a lot of the talent was being sucked away. But now that you're creating these opportunities, you're able to retain all that talent. I think it's going to grow dramatically in the next 5 years. I definitely see that.
Absolutely. Does anyone have any last questions? If not, I would like to thank Kashmira again for taking time out of her extremely busy schedule to talk with us. So thank you.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions. I'll be happy to talk to you offline as well. Rob has my contact, but LinkedIn is the best way. So yeah, and good luck to everyone, and keep in touch.
Yes,
Thank you
so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.